from October this year, Australia is never going to see the prices that it used to see on properties ever again, because Australian government is allowing people to put down 5% deposits and borrow the rest to buy a house, which is crazy. It used to be that you needed to save up 20% of the value of the house, but now you only need to save a quarter, which is only 5% of the value of the house, which means that for let's say an $800,000 property, one would have had to save up $160,000 to buy the house, but now you only need $40,000 and then your stamp duty, which is existent on both scenarios, to buy a house. So that is an incredible difference. Also, when you typically borrow more than 80% of the value of a house, you would need to pay LMI, but LMI will no longer be applicable as a result of this scheme, which applies to first home buyers. Now, it used to be that only 35,000 allocations were provided, but now this can apply to anybody who qualifies. And also there are no income caps on the applicants anymore. So if you're a first home buyer and you actually make more money than the cap in the past, which was $120,000, let's say you somehow make a lot more money than that, you can still participate in this scheme. And then also the property prices used to have a cap previously, but that cap also has increased, which then allows for more properties to be able to be purchased under this new first home guarantee scheme. And that is quite significant. New South Wales used to impose a cap that anything above $900,000, the first home owners could not buy these sort of properties. And so that cap has now increased to $101.5 million. And that's because this particular region, this particular state has increased by that amount. So the government has indexed the property prices that typical first home buyers are going for. So it's really an interesting thing to see that first home buyers would look at a budget of $900,000 within the last sort of half a decade, but nowadays they're looking at prices at least or in and around that $1.5 million. And we're looking at Victoria, we're looking at that similar increase from 800K to 950. Queensland 700 to 1 million. So Queensland obviously has grown up quite a fair bit, and then WA 600 to 850, and then SA 600 to 900,000, and then you've got Tasmania, which has gone from 600 to 700,000, because it's hard to keep property prices under that price, based on the construction costs and the land prices that has gone up as well. So the government is allowing for a larger pool of properties to be accessible to first-home buyers when it comes to budget, and also when it comes to the actual value of the property as well. So based on this, what's really important that you as an investor need to understand is that you might go, well, this only applies to first-home buyers, right? I'm not a first-home buyer, I'm just an investor. Or you might be a first-home buyer, which then this directly benefits you to be able to access the market with bigger budget, and you can enter the market more quickly as well, because you don't have to save that 20%. And the data on that is that, well, typically that for a house price of anywhere between $500,000 to $1 million, you had to say the time that it would take for a normal Australian to save up enough money for a down payment to buy these properties. It'll take you 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 13 years at these price levels. And typically most capital cities where the biggest populations accumulate are around that 900, 800 to $1 million mark, where people usually had to save 11 years to be able to save a 20% deposit for a property. Now, this is these calculations are assuming that they have an average annual income of $100,000 and they save 15% of their income. To play catch up for the next 10 years, for the next 11 years, is actually really, really difficult. But then that has dropped to 2 to 3 years, which I think is incredibly quick. So for those people who have made a start 3 years ago, they're all of a sudden finding themselves ready to buy right now. So that increases the number of buyers that are all of a sudden qualified and ready to buy pretty much straight away. And based on that, the implication for property prices across Australia is that it's going to be bumping median house prices anywhere between 4 and 7%, with Melbourne leading the actual scoreboard. And one of the reasons why I see that as being a very significant area of growth is because right now Melbourne has the highest number of first home buyer approvals. So first home buyer finance approval. So these loan commitments are approved the most in Melbourne, which means Melbourne has the most number of people who are ready to go, who's been recently told that their situation is going to be even better off. Their budget can even extend further. They can enter into a market sooner. And that's the reason why Melbourne is leading the forecast when it comes to growing the most as a result of this new scheme. Another opportunity, small opportunity that I see in this is that a lot of the caps that have been increased are still quite close to the median prices that you see around the capital city area. So regional area, the median house prices are still nice and low, which means that this new scheme with their caps on regional areas are still going to encompass quite a large proportion of regional properties also. There's going to be some buyer activity that I particularly forecast in regional centers as well. Not to mention, the stock on dwelling across Australia in general has been dropping. So since 2015, throughout COVID and whatnot, the number of dwellings available in Australia has been dropping quite significantly. It's on a downward trend. We're not creating more homes, but we're increasing our population. For example, Melbourne has increased its population by 1 million people since 10 years ago. So whilst people have been increasing, the number of dwelling has been decreasing, which is quite crazy. And the crisis clocks in the shortfall at 1.2 million houses that needs to be built between a year ago until 5 years since 2024. But since 2024 July, we've only just approved just over 200,000 homes, which means it's far behind its target. So the supply right now is incredibly short. Not to mention, we've got interest rates that are on a downward trend since about the end of 2024. So now we're sitting at a cash rate around about 3.4, 3.5%. And that interest rate continually on a downward trend right now is then going to allow for more cash to be borrowed. So with the lower deposit, more cash to be borrowed, more buyer activity in the area, we're going to see, I personally see one of the most violent growth that Australia has never seen before to follow into the rest of this year and into the first and second quarter of next year.